Get your trash out of here. The owner is coming in an hour, and I can't have a senile old woman smelling up the place." Those were the words my son-in-law Mark spat at me as he kicked a box of my books down the hallway. The books spilled open. My first editions, my late husband's journals. Skidding across the polished marble floor of the penthouse, I stood there, clutching my cane, looking at the man my daughter Julia had married. Mark was wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, standing in the living room of the apartment I had paid for, drinking scotch from my crystal collection. "Mark, please," Julia whispered, trying to gather the books. She looked terrified. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Mom can stay in the guest room. She won't make a sound, no," Mark roared, slamming his glass down. "The big boss is coming tonight. The CEO of the entire holding company. This is my chance, Julia. I need this penthouse to host the mixer." I told them this was my place. If they see her shuffling around, I look weak. I look like I'm running a nursing home. He turned to me, his eyes full of contempt. "Go to the basement. There's a storage room near the boiler. You can sleep there tonight and take your junk with you." I looked at him. I looked at my daughter, who was trembling, too afraid to stand up to him. "You want me to leave the penthouse?" I asked, my voice calm. "I want you out of my sight," Mark sneered. Now I nodded slowly. I bent down, picked up a single photograph of my late husband, Arthur, and put it in my purse. "Very well," I said. "I will leave, and don't come back until I text you," he shouted as I walked to the elevator. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, blocking out Mark's arrogant face, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I checked my watch. It was 6 p.m. I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. "Mr. Henderson?" I said when the voice answered. "Mrs. Eleanor." The voice on the other end was shocked. "It's been so long. Is everything all right?" "No, James," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Activate Protocol Omega and call the board of directors. Tell them the big boss is attending the mixer tonight after all." You see, Mark didn't know who I was. To him, I was Eleanor, the widow who moved in 3 years ago after a bad investment left me broke. He thought I was living off his charity. He didn't know that my full name is Eleanor Vance Rothschild. He didn't know that my late husband and I built this skyscraper in 1985. He didn't know that the holding company he worked for, the one he was trying to impress, was mine. I owned 85% of the shares. I wasn't just the mother-in-law he kicked out. I was the landlady. An eviction notice was about to be served. Let me tell you how it got to this. 3 years ago, Arthur passed away. We had a real estate empire spanning 3 states, but we lived quietly. We hated the spotlight. When Julia married Mark, I had my doubts. He was ambitious, flashy, obsessed with status, but Julia loved him. When Arthur died, I felt lonely in our big estate. Julia suggested I move into the penthouse of the city spire, one of our buildings. Mark was working as a mid-level manager for the property firm there. I decided to run a test Arthur and I had always talked about. I would move in, but I would pretend to have lost most of the fortune. I wanted to see if Mark loved my daughter, or if he loved the potential inheritance. I transferred the deed of the penthouse to a shell company, Vance Holdings, and let Mark rent it for $1 a year as an employee perk. I moved in as the poor mother-in-law. For 3 years I watched Mark verbally abuse my daughter. I watched him spend his salary on watches and cars, while Julia wore 3-year-old dresses. I watched him treat the doormen like dirt. But lately, things had gotten worse. Mark had been promoted to regional manager. The power had gone to his head. He started talking about cleansing the building of low-income tenants, who I personally subsidized. He started skimming off the maintenance budget. I saw the reports, though he didn't know I saw them. Tonight was the breaking point. Tonight he had physically thrown me out of my own home to impress the owner. The elevator opened in the lobby. The concierge, David, saw me with my purse and my cane. "Mrs. Eleanor?" David asked, rushing out from behind the desk. "Are you going out?" "It's raining," David knew. He was one of the few who knew. He had been with the company for 20 years. "David," I said, "Mark just kicked me out. He sent me to the boiler room." David's face went pale. He did what?" "He wants to impress the owner tonight," I said dryly. "He thinks the owner is coming, but..." "You are the owner," David whispered. "Exactly," I smiled. Is the boardroom prepared? Yes, ma'am, the board is assembling now, Mr. Henderson called. Good. Take me to the staff entrance, I need to change. I didn't go to a boiler room. I went to the owner's suite on the top floor of the adjacent tower, connected by a private bridge. It was a space I kept for business, filled with my suits, my jewelry, and my real documents. I stripped off the wool cardigan and house slippers Mark despised. I put on my bespoke Italian silk suit. I put on the emerald necklace Arthur gave me for our 40th anniversary. The one Mark thought was costume jewelry. I pinned my hair up. I applied my signature red lipstick. I looked in the mirror. The senile old woman was gone. The chairwoman was back. At 7 p.m. I watched the security feed from the penthouse. Mark was preening. He had catered food, expensive wine. He was yelling at Julia because the napkins weren't folded correctly. If this goes well, I heard him say on the camera, I'm going to be VP. And then we're putting your mother in a home, a cheap one. I'm done looking at her. Julia was crying silently in the kitchen. My heart broke for her, but tonight, I was going to save her. At 7:30 p.m. the guests arrived. These weren't just Mark's friends. These were the investors, the board members, people who worked for me. They walked in looking confused. They saw Mark acting like the king of the castle. Welcome. Welcome to my humble abode, Mark announced, holding a glass of champagne. The CEO should be here any minute. I can't wait to show him how I've turned this building around. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, and the acting CEO walked in. He looked at Mark with a strange expression. Mark, Henderson said, you said the penthouse was vacant, you're living here? Oh, just temporary. Mark lied. I'm keeping it warm for the VIPs. You know how it is, leadership perks, I see, Henderson said. And your mother-in-law? Eleanor? I heard she was living with you. Oh, her? Mark laughed. She's away visiting relatives. She was getting a bit, you know. He tapped his temple. Senile, hard to manage. We're looking into facilities. Julia flinched in the corner. Is that so? Henderson asked. Well, the majority shareholder is on her way up. She wants a full tour. She? Mark blinked. I thought the owner was a man, a Mr. Vance? Mr. Vance passed away, Henderson said. Mrs. Vance runs the empire now. Mark paled slightly but recovered. Great. A widow, I'm good with old ladies, I can charm her. I'll wrap her around my finger. I was in the private elevator now. David stood beside me, holding a tablet with Mark's financial records. Ready, ma'am? David asked. Ready, I said. The elevator chimed. The doors to the penthouse opened directly into the living room. The room went silent. I stepped out. Click, click, click. My heels on the marble floor sounded like gunshots. Mark turned around, his smile ready. Then he saw me. He didn't recognize me at first. He saw the suit, the emeralds, the power. Then he saw the face. His jaw dropped. Eleanor? What? What are you doing here? I told you to go to the boiler room. You stole. Where did you get those clothes? Did you steal them from Julia? He marched toward me, grabbing my arm. You are embarrassing me. Get out before security drags you out. Remove your hand, I said. My voice wasn't the soft mumble he was used to. It was the voice that commanded a billion-dollar boardroom. Mark flinched, but anger took over. Listen to me, you old hag. Mr. Simmons. Henderson barked. Step away from the chairwoman. Mark froze. He looked at Henderson. He looked at me. Chair. What? Ladies and gentlemen, Henderson announced to the room. May I introduce the owner of Vance Holdings, the owner of this building, and your boss. Mrs. Eleanor Vance. The board members applauded. They nodded respectfully. Mark looked like he had been slapped. He let go of my arm and stumbled back. No, he whispered, no, she's broke. She lost her money in '08, she told me. I lied, I said, stepping further into the room. I wanted to see if you were a decent man, Mark. I wanted to see if you deserved my daughter. I looked at Julia. She was staring at me, eyes wide. Mom? I'm sorry I deceived you, darling, I said softly to her. But I needed to know. I turned back to Mark. The shock was fading, replaced by panic. This is a joke, Mark stammered. Julia, did you know? You tricked me. She didn't know, I said. Nobody knew except Henderson and David, because I wanted to see how you treated the powerless. And tonight, Mark, you threw me out like trash. I was stressed. Mark tried to pivot. Eleanor. Mom. Look, you know how much pressure I'm under. I did it for the family. I wanted to impress the boss so I could get a raise for us. For us? I asked. Or for your gambling debts? Mark froze again. David handed me the tablet. I've been reviewing the building's accounts, Mark, I said, scrolling through the screen. Since you became regional manager, maintenance costs have gone up 40%, but the repairs aren't being done. The roof is leaking in 4B. The elevator in the west wing is out of service. I tapped the screen, but strangely you bought a Porsche last month. Cash, that was a bonus. Mark shouted. Sweat was beading on his forehead. There were no bonuses issued this quarter, Henderson said coldly. You've been siphoning HFEs, I said. You created fake contractor invoices, Simmons Repairs. A shell company registered to your name. The room gasped. The investors were whispering, that's a lie. Mark screamed. She's crazy. She's senile. Don't listen to her. I have the bank transfers, I said. David? David projected the screen onto the wall TV. The same TV Mark had bought with stolen money. It showed the wire transfers. From the building fund to Mark's personal account. $250,000 over 6 months. Embezzlement, I stated, fraud and elder abuse. Mark looked around the room. He realized there was no escape. The arrogance crumbled into desperation. Julia. He yelled at my daughter. Tell them I'm a good husband. Tell them I take care of you. Julia stepped forward. She wiped her eyes. She looked at the man who had terrified her for 3 years. Mark, she said, her voice shaking but clear. You told me yesterday that I was worthless without you. You told me my mother was a burden. I was joking, baby. You know me. You threw her books in the hall, Julia said. You made her sleep in a guest room while you used the master suite. You are a monster, you ungrateful bee. Mark lunged at her. Security. I said. 2 large men in suits. My personal security. Stepped out from the kitchen where they had been waiting. They grabbed Mark before he could touch her. They pinned his arms behind his back. Mark Simmons, I said. You are fired. Effective immediately. You can't do this. Mark screamed, struggling. I have rights. I have a contract. Your contract has a clause for criminal misconduct, Henderson said. And as the landlord, I am evicting you. Evicting me? Mark laughed hysterically. This is my home. My name is on the lease. Actually, I smiled. The lease is in the name of the employee. Since you are no longer an employee, you are trespassing. I looked at the security guards. Take him out and call the police. We have a file ready for them. They dragged him toward the door. As he passed me, he spat on the floor near my shoes. You tricked me. You old witch. You ruined my life. You ruined it yourself, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. They dragged him out. The sound of his screaming faded down the hallway. The room was silent. The party guests, the elite of the city, looked at me with a mix of awe and fear. I walked over to Julia. She was crying, but she was smiling too. Mom, she said, you own the building? I own the block, honey, I winked. And the penthouse? It's yours, in your name, sole ownership, but Mark is going to prison, I said. Henderson has already frozen his accounts. He won't get a dime. You file for divorce tomorrow. I've already hired the best lawyer in the state. Julia hugged me. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Thank you. I didn't know how to leave. I was so scared. I know, I whispered. I'm sorry I waited so long, but he needed to hang himself. I turned to the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I said. I apologize for the disturbance. Please enjoy the champagne. It is, after all, my champagne. The party continued, but the mood had changed. People came up to me, shaking my hand, apologizing for not visiting sooner. They knew the power had shifted. Mark's trial was short. The evidence of embezzlement was overwhelming. He tried to claim I had entrapped him, that I had set him up, but the fake invoices were in his handwriting. The bank accounts were in his name. He got 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. But the real victory wasn't the prison sentence. It was the discovery we made afterwards, when we cleared out Mark's office, which was actually my husband's old study. We found a notebook. Mark had been keeping a list of vulnerable tenants in my buildings, elderly widows, single mothers. He had been bullying them, raising their rent illegally, threatening eviction if they didn't pay cash bonuses to him. He wasn't just stealing from the company. He was terrorizing the people I had sworn to protect. I spent the next 6 months visiting every person on that list. I refunded their money personally. I fired the staff who had helped him. I installed David, the concierge who had been loyal, as the new building manager. And Julia? Julia flourished. Freed from Mark's constant criticism, she went back to school. She studied interior design. Something Mark had told her was stupid. She redesigned the penthouse. She made it bright, open, full of light. She met a nice man a year later, an architect. He didn't care about the penthouse. He cared about her. I moved out of the penthouse. I gave it to Julia officially. I moved into a smaller unit on the ground floor with a garden. I liked being closer to the earth, but I kept my office and I kept my eyes open. One day, I received a letter from prison. It was from Mark. Eleanor, it read. I know you hate me, but I need money for the commissary. Please, we were family. I sat at my desk. I took out my pen. My husband's Mont Blanc. I wrote back, Mark, a wet dog learns not to bark, but a greedy dog learns not to bite the hand that feeds it. Request denied. The landlady. I sealed the envelope, I stamped it, and I went back to work, because there are always more buildings to manage and always more wolves trying to get in. But as long as I have my cane and my checkbook, this house is safe. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to deal with an ungrateful family member? How did you handle it? I read every comment. Until next time, keep your leases signed and your eyes open.